It's my zchut to welcome everybody here for the special evening of learning in memory of a very special person, Rabbi Brachfeld, Zichron Livracha. I first met Mr. Brachfeld, of blessed memory, probably just a few months after I started in my ma'amad at the OU. And he came into the, as was Kedarko HaKodesh, he came into the OU to seek me out. Not that he didn't pick up the phone, he didn't call, he came personally to seek me out, that he was looking for an opportunity to dedicate a learning program in memory of his daughter, Allah Shalom. And it just happened at the time that I literally started my ma'amad less than a year before, and just 2 weeks before that, we had hired our dear friend, who many of you know, Rabbi Zamir Ozarowski, to head up women's learning programs at the OU. And we turned to Zamira, together with Mr. Brachfeld, and said, we have an opportunity to create something very special. That program is now 8.5 years later, continues every single month. Thousands of women have participated and been inspired by that monthly Rosh Chodesh program that is dedicated in memory of your mother, Liat. And it's an incredible zchut to be able to have that program continue in her memory. Of course, a few years after that, Mrs. Brachfeld, Shalom, passed away. And of course, she used to come not just Rosh Chodesh, she used to come for other programs too. But I remember her sitting there smiling and very humbly, like anytime I would say thank you, she would, the two of them would be get upset at me that I'm thanking them. And after her passing, once again, I had a knock on my door in my office. And Mr. Brachfeld came to see me personally and said, I want to continue to sponsor the Rosh Chodesh program, which is such a beautiful program. But what could we come up with that we could do to honor the memory of my late wife? And together we created the base. The base is our men's, just as we had a successful women's learning program, we now have a successful men's program. And Rav Aschi, of course, is a cornerstone of that program. Not only your weekly halacha shiur in Yerushalayim that's been going on for years already weekly, but now, Baruch Hashem, we've expanded the base to include a kol boker in Modi'in, to include a lunch and learn in Modi'in. That Rav Aschi is responsible for both of those. And in addition to that, we have our Safras course, which has now grown. Our Safras course has now grown exponentially with 3 chaburot happening simultaneously, men writing their own Megillas Esther, happening simultaneously now in Yerushalayim, Beit Shemesh, Modi'in, and we continue to expand and reach more and more people, inspire more and more people through Limud Torah, and that's all in the zchus of Mr. and Mrs. Brachfeld, who not only had the vision to dedicate this, but to insist that it should be done in a mechubad way. And Mr. Brachfeld and I became friends, dear friends. Rav Aschi had the opportunity to sit with us on many occasions. And later on, as he got a little bit older, he was finally allowed me to come visit him in the lobby by his residence instead of him coming to the office. It was always like a joke between us, but an argument between us that he didn't want to be matriach. He didn't want to be matriach the rabbi, but I insisted that he's taking away my mitzvah of being mechubad him. And we finally made a pshara that he'll meet me in the lobby of his residence. And Rav Aschi will recall on numerous occasions that what struck me every time we sat, besides all the beautiful stories about his Rebbe, Rav Pam, was that he insisted to walk me not only to the door, but literally walk me up the stairs outside till I got to the street on King George Street. And every time I would say, Rabbi Yosef Hill, he said, Rabbi, you taught me a lesson a few years ago. I can't take away your mitzvah, so now you can't take away my mitzvah, he would say to me. So that was a special relationship we had, and it was a zchus to be able to have such a person, such a kind person, a person who had such kavod Torah, such refined midos, such just kavod brios, and we miss him. But his spirit lives on through the Torah that we continue to share in these beautiful programs. So I want to just share an idea before I hand the microphone over to Rav Aschi. I wanted to share a beautiful idea that I saw in the Sefer Eish Kodesh. The Sefer Eish Kodesh, of course, is the beautiful Divrei Torah from the Warsaw Ghetto of the Piasetzler Rebbe. The Piasetzler Rebbe talks about this idea of dedicating learning, dedicating limud or a mitzvah, ilu nishmas, one who has left this world. What does it mean to dedicate learning or a mitzvah in memory of a departed soul? And he points to a very interesting medrash in the Medrash Tanchuma. In the Medrash Tanchuma, there's a discussion that takes place between Moshe Rabbeinu and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then that Medrash, Moshe says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Mish'ani meit, ein ani nizkar. When I leave this world, when I pass away, who's going to remember me? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu turns to him and says, Chayecha, don't be ridiculous. Every time they open up a Sefer Torah and they read the words, V'yadaber Hashem al Moshe lemor, it'll be as if you're there, you Moshe Rabbeinu are there together with Klal Yisrael, continuing to teach them Torah. And the Piasetzler Rebbe takes his medrash and he says the most beautiful idea. He says, Ulechein, therefore, chutz min amiras kadesh v'limud mishnayis acharei niftarim. Then he says, therefore, more than just saying Kaddish or learning Mishnah in memory of those who have departed, right? What's the idea of learning Mishnah? Mishnah is the same otiyot as neshama, as soul. So we learn Mishnah to elevate the soul. So he says, in addition to those two beautiful ideas of reciting Kaddish and learning Mishnayos for those that have left us, who have passed, Tova hi li'ah neshamot, gan kishezochrin otam be'et asiyat mitzvah v'talmud Torah. It's a kindness for the neshama to recall them when we're learning Torah, when we're doing a mitzvah. But listen to his words. Lo zichira bilvad. It's not solely intellectual recall by naming their names or having fond memories about them. But listen to the Rebbe's words. Kasher otan la'asot ha-mitzvah limud Torah yachad. But what are we doing? We're allowing that neshama to join together with us in the mitzvah and in the limud of Torah together. It's as if that neshama is still here with us, learning together with us, teaching us Torah through his refined midos, through his beautiful stories of his Rebbe Rav Pam. It's as if Rabbi Yosef Hillel is here with us as we learn together this evening. So, my friends, we're in for a treat to hear from Rav Aschi Dick, of course, a beloved family member, grandson of Rabbi Yosef Hillel, and a very, very well-respected member of our faculty. And Rav Aschi is going to share a beautiful shiur on a halachic sugya with us this evening.
Thank you, Rabbi Sam, for that beautiful introduction. Highly appreciated. It's hard to do justice to Rav Yosef Hillel. As you pointed out, he was somebody who loved Torah, somebody who lived the lessons of his Rebbe, Rabbi Pam, to the end of his days, and he was an Ohev Torah, and it is my honor to be able to give a shiur Li'ilu Nishmasai. Thank you, everybody who came. Thank you, Rabbi Sam. Poschen B'chvod Asanya, the OU, which in my view is the gold standard of Torah, of Derech Eretz. It's been a pleasure to work with you, Rabbi Sam, and I thank you for that. It's been a pleasure to work with every single member of the management and the staff of the OU. So again, thank you. Thank you to Beit HaKnesset HaNasi for hosting us tonight. So let's begin a sugya. I hope that, as you mentioned, the neshama of Rav Yosef Hillel is here with us, listening to the Torah that we're learning, Li'ilu Nishmasa, and I hope that everybody here will enjoy the sugya, and that the neshama, as I mentioned, the neshama of Rav Yosef Hillel will also enjoy this sugya. Okay, so it was a bit of a challenge to find the right topic for tonight, because I like to do Inyana D'Yoma. We're kind of in an isolated period from the Yomim Tovim. We're about a month after Sukkot. We still have about a month to go for Chanukah, so we're smack in the middle. I had to kind of rack my brain, what's in Yana Diyoma? So I said, let's discuss a sugya. We are between the dates of the 7th of Cheshvan, when the communities in Eretz Yisrael have already begun to say the Tein Talumatar in the bracha of Baruch Eleinu. We have yet to reach the 4th of December. That is the date on which the communities in the diaspora and Chutz La'aretz will begin to say the Tein Talumatar. And a common shaila that arises for people that travel back and forth. I would not be surprised if quite a number of people here in this room had to face this shaila. It's a question that is halacha l'maisa and is actually quite complicated. So with the help of Hashem, let's begin. So if you're looking at your reference sheets, I put a few bullet points that summarize what we're about to see this evening. So as I mentioned, the transition to Moed HaGeshem takes place on between Shacharit and Musaf of Shmini Atzeret. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the transition for V'tein Talumatar, which is the request for rain, that happens on the 7th of Cheshvan in Eretz Yisrael. The reason is because there are those that made the pilgrimage to Eretz Yisrael, to Yerushalayim. We don't want them to get caught in the rain on the way back. So even though the rainy season should really begin right after Sukkot, but we don't request for rain because we don't want the travelers that came to Yerushalayim that now need to make their way back, we don't want them to get caught in the downpours. So therefore we delay the request for rain until the 7th of Cheshvan. That's 15 days. And the Rishonim discuss why today, when we have no Beit HaMikdash, why are we continuing to delay the request for rain? Today we don't have that issue of Oli Regalim. Even if people do come to visit Eretz Yisrael, they can get back very quickly with plane, with car. Really a bit of a perplexing issue why we have to wait until the 7th of Cheshvan. Okay, so that's the general introduction to this section of the Shiur. Number one, yes, please.
So if you're here, I always have this question.
Yeah.
Why do we have a different date in America, and why is the date a secular day?
Excellent, beautiful. I would like to repeat the question. I don't know your name, but your question doesn't matter. So the question was, how can we choose a secular date, the 4th of December for Chutz La'aretz, and why are we asking for rain on a different date in Chutz La'aretz than we are in Eretz Yisrael? That is a beautiful question. Hopefully we'll address that tonight. So the Mishnah number 1 in the beginning of Ta'anit says that the transition to say Mashiv Haruach Moed HaGeshem, which is not a request for rain, but is a praise to Hashem for having the rain fall. Okay, that begins between Shacharit and Musaf on Shmini Atzeret. Gvurot, correct. It comes in the second blessing of Shemona Esrei, Ata Gibar, which talks about the strength of Hashem. The rain is an expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's strength, so we praise Hashem for the rain in the second bracha of Shemona Esrei. So Rabbi Yochanan, which is the last section, number 2 in the reference sheet, the Gemara in Ta'anit Daf Dalet Amud Bet. Rabbi Yochanan, that really, when we begin to say Mashav Ruach Moed HaGeshem, we also begin to say B'tein Talumatar. That means we really begin to praise Hashem for the rain on the same date that we request for rain. So the Gemara says that doesn't make sense. Rabbi Yochanan taught us that we have to actually delay the request for rain. So the Gemara answers that Kan Bizman Shebeit HaMikdash Kayam, Kan Bizman She'ein Beit HaMikdash Kayam, that only when the Beis HaMikdash is standing do we delay the request for rain until the 7th of Cheshvan. But when there's no Beit HaMikdash, so just as we begin to say Mashav Ruach Moed HaGeshem at the end of Sukkot, so that we also begin to say V'tein Talumatar right after Sukkot. Okay? Now, everybody's thinking to themselves, that's not what we do, right? If you just read this Gemara, you'd be wondering to yourself, why are we today, without a Beit HaMikdash, waiting until the 7th of Cheshvan to begin the request for rain? The Gemara seems to say that the delay until the 7th of Cheshvan to request for rain is only when the Beit HaMikdash is standing. Okay, but it should be noted that a great number of Rishonim actually ruled that today, without the Beit HaMikdash, that as soon as Sukkot is over, we should begin to say V'tein Talumatar. Number 3, the Sefer Shulchan quotes the Ramban. Okay, the Ramban quotes the Gaonim that say that in today's day of age, when we don't have the Beit HaMikdash, we should begin to say V'tein Talumatar as soon as Sukkot is over. Okay, also number 4, the Sefer Orchot Chaim. Number 3, the Chidushei Talmud HaRamban. He also says that this was the minig in certain communities in Spain and in Provence. In fact, they did begin to say V'tein Tal Umatar as soon as Sukkot was over. The Ra'ah, Rabbi Aaron Halevi, who was also a student of the Ramban. Number 7, the Ritva, the famous Ritva, who was a student of Rabbi Aaron Halevi, so he was a student of the Ramban student. He says the same thing. Just look at the bold section of the Ritva, number 7, in Ta'anit Daf Yud. Osin ke'eretz Yisrael v'sholin miyad l'matzah yom tov. Number 8, also the Ran. Number 9, the Meiri. Number 10, the Riyaz, he lived in Italy towards the end of the Rishonic period. The Sefer Hashlama, you get the point that there is a consensus amongst the Rishonim. We've listed here about 7 or 8 Rishonim, all of whom say that we should really begin to say V'tein Tal Umatar immediately after Sukkot, because there's no need to wait. We don't have a Beit HaMikdash. People are not making Aliyah L'Regel. So why is it that we don't adhere to the opinion of these Rishonim? So the reason is because of number 12 and 13, the Rif and the Rambam. The Rif and the Rambam leave out this halacha that when there's no Beit HaMikdash, we should really begin to ask for rain as Sukkot is over. Now, the Rif is interesting. The Rif, he lived in northern Africa. He was from the early Rishonic period. All he really did was he made an abridgment of the Talmud. He took out all the sections of the Talmud that are just back and forth, Shachtel V'Tarya, and he collected the sections in the Talmud that tell us the halacha l'maisa, that tell us exactly what needs to be done, the bottom line of everything in the Talmud. And he added some of the psakim from the Gaonim, some of his own psakim, some minor explanations. So when the Rif omits something, his omission is as telling as what he does say. So if the Rif didn't mention at all that when there's no Beit HaMikdash, we should begin to ask for rain as soon as Sukkot is over, that means that he doesn't have this distinction. The Rambam, who usually goes in the footsteps of the Rif, the Rambam usually follows his psakim also. Look at number 13 in the reference sheet in Hilchos Tefillah, Perek Beis Halacha Tet Zayin. He says, "B'shinar u'b'Suria u'b'Mitzrayim u'mokomas hasmuchin le'elu." In all the lands that surround Eretz Yisrael, you wait to the Yom Shishim Achar Tkufa Tishrei. You wait for 60 days after the beginning of the autumn season. Okay? You asked a wonderful question. How can we go according to the secular date? The answer is because the secular date is based exclusively on the seasons, on the sun. The seasons are determined by the solar cycle. So therefore, if you want to get 60 days after the beginning of the autumn season, which begins after the fall equinox, when the day and the night are of equal length, if you count 60 days, that brings you to the 4th of December. That is when they wanted rain in Bavel. Okay? It used to be the 4th of December. It used to be the 25th of November, and they changed the calendar in the Middle Ages, then it became the 4th of December. Okay? But the Rambam...
Changed to different time?
No, it's 60 days after after the beginning of the autumn season, which is the spring equinox. You find the day where the night and the day are completely equal, and then you count 60 days. In today's calendar, that brings you to the 4th of September. Again, the Rambam completely omits the fact that when there's no Beit HaMikdash, we should begin the request for rain right after Sukkot. And who was asked about this question? The son of the Rambam. The Rambam's biggest offender was his son, Rabbeinu Avram. He's the only son that we know of from the Rambam. He himself was a great Rishon in his own right, and he was very defensive for his a lot of the psakim of his father that were attacked. He came along and he defended them. And there are sheilas and shuvas from the son of the Rambam. It's called Shut Birchat Avram. He has another sheilas and shuvas called Shut Ma'aseh Nisim. So in there he was asked, how come your father didn't paskin like the Gemara? The Gemara said that when there's no Beit HaMikdash, we should begin to say V'tein Tal Umatar as soon as Sukkot is over. How come your father left it out? So he says we don't paskin like that Gemara. There's another Gemara a few daf later on Ta'anit Daf Yud where the Gemara doesn't mention that when there's no Beit HaMikdash, you begin to say V'tein Tal Umatar as soon as Sukkot is over. So therefore the Rambam decided not to paskin that way. The Ran, number 15, gives another interesting defense of the Rambam's position. Number 15, look at the bold section. It's the Ran in Ta'anit Daf Beis Amud Aleph. Lefi shayu mitasvin b'chol hasvivot b'regel Yerushalayim k'mosha osin hayom. You're right. The Gemara does say that when there's no Beit HaMikdash, So there's no reason to delay the request for rain. Again, let's repeat what we said before, that the reason why we delay the request for rain for 15 days is so the people who made the pilgrimage can get back home without getting stuck in the rain. It says until they can get to the Nahar Parat, until they can get to the Euphrates River. One explanation that I heard is that if there was lots of rain, the Euphrates River would get so large that they would be unable to cross the river. Okay, so the people who made the pilgrimage had to go back home. Says the Ran, well, today, even though there is no Beit HaMikdash, people were still making the pilgrimage, so therefore they decided to treat the situation as though there was a Beit HaMikdash. Even though there is no Beit HaMikdash, but since people were making the trip to Eretz Yisrael, even in the absence of the Beit HaMikdash, so they decided that they're going to only request for rain on the 7th of Cheshvan, so people could get back home. That's the explanation of the Ran.
You see it also today that lots of people come in.
Yes, so today a lot of people come into the Chagim, but today is interesting. But people, nobody today needs 15 days to get back home. Today we have planes, so how long does it take to get back home? A day, 2 days, maybe if you have a stopover to Australia, maybe it'll take you a bit longer, but it does not take anybody 15 days to get home unless you're taking a cruise. But I don't think the cruise ship is going to be interfered because of rain, right? Cruises, maybe it's not as fun to be on a cruise when it's raining, but it definitely doesn't prevent you from getting home. So here we have a very interesting situation, that if you go purely according to logic, we should really go back, at least according to the Ran's explanation, we should go back to the original instructive of the Gemara. The Gemara said that if there's no Beit HaMikdash, so why delay the request for rain? So the Ran said, well, people are making the pilgrimage anyways, so we'll treat the situation as though the Beit HaMikdash was standing. But today, people can hop on a plane, people can hop in a car, rain doesn't cancel flights. Rain doesn't prevent people from driving in the car, so there's a strong logical argument to say that we should go back to the original instructive of the Gemara that says when there's no Beit HaMikdash, we should begin to request rain as soon as the Yom Tov of Sukkot is over. Now, I don't recommend that anybody try to change the minhag, okay? There's an expression we say every day in davening, Osa Chadashot, Ba'al Muhammad. If you try to make changes, you're asking for war. So people ask me, well, the Ran himself is suggesting that they made a change, because the Gemara said if there's no Beit HaMikdash, begin to ask for rain right as soon as Sukkot is over. So they changed from the Gemara. So if they changed from the Gemara because people were making the pilgrimage, why can't we change from the Ran if we have planes and cars today? The difference is they were able to get away with making changes, but today, changes is something that doesn't go. It's very hard to make changes. A lot of it has to do with the reformist movement that the Khatam Sofer especially was very responsible for ingraining this idea not to change anything that you saw your grandfather doing. Don't change anything you saw your great-grandfather doing. There's a joke that goes that in Bells they don't take Trumas and Maisers. So they came to the Rebbe. They says, why are you not taking Trumas and Maisers? Well, I didn't see my grandfather taking Trumas and Maisers. Before you quote me on questioning the validity of their Hechsher Chas v'Shalom, that's not what I'm doing. I'm making a joke. You have to be careful today, so you're not taken out of context. But today there is an extreme inhibition to doing anything, to changing things. Everybody likes to keep things the way they are. And there's a certain benefit because when you do what you saw your grandmother do and you saw your great-grandmother do, it creates a certain emotional connection to the Yiddishkeit, a certain emotional connection to the way you grew up, so there is a benefit in that. So I don't think anybody's going to be successful to get everybody to start saying the same Talamot as soon as Sukkot is over because we have planes and cars today. But it's still something interesting. It's a case study of where logic tells you to do one thing, but tradition tells you to do another thing. You know, fiddle on the roof, tradition, you know, that's the way you got to go, okay? So, and there are many, many cases of that, and this is one case study, okay? I'll give you another example. The Gemara says the glass doesn't absorb flavoring. So therefore you can take a glass vessel and you can use it for milchigs, you can use it for fleishigs as long as you clean it really well. Now, a lot of poskim have argued that stainless steel is the same thing. If you wash a stainless steel pot really, really well, I know sometimes it could be hard to wash it, but take a good sponge, take a very good soap, a good soap, scrub it really, really well. I highly doubt that you're going to taste anything milchig or fleishig, okay, in the next thing that you cook. But you can't tell people to just forget about milchiks and fleishes when it comes to their pots and pans, right? People want to do what they saw their mother doing, what their grandmother doing. It's part of the emotional connection to Yiddishkeit. So there are many, many case examples where logic dictates one thing, but tradition tells us to do something else. And today we're very strong about tradition. So logic, again, just to repeat the idea, there is a strong logical basis to say that today we have planes, today we have cars, so we should start requesting for rain as soon as Sukkot is over. People getting stuck in the rain on their way back from the pilgrimage to Jerusalem is not an issue anymore, but still, that's the way it is. That's the way it's going to be left, okay? So now we move on to part number 2 of the Shiur. I think the Shiur will finish 8:30, is that correct? Okay, so we have about another 25 minutes of the Shiur. Now let's just read the key points there, number 2. We're going to read it from the English. Now, I'm reading again from the sheets. Because Babel was situated in the lowlands, it had an excess of water. So rain was only beneficial 60 days after the start of the autumn season. Therefore, they only began to save Etain Umatar from then. Rashi maintains that the entire diaspora follows the custom of Bavel and begins to ask for rain 60 days into the Tekufa, which is today, the 4th of December. Yet the Rosh was very adamant that Europe should do as Eretz Yisrael, and they should begin to ask for rain no later than the 7th of Cheshvan. Okay, so the Rosh said he had a major issue. There's a long tshuva, long response from the Rosh. The Rosh, he lived in Germany. He was a student of the Maram Yurtenberg, 12th century Rishon, a little bit towards the end of the Rishonim. He was maybe the greatest Ashkenazic Rishon after maybe Rashi, but he was definitely a great legacy. I'm just going to I made a bracha already. So the Rosh said he really tried to change things. He says, Bavel was situated in the lowlands. The Bavel, they used to put their grain out in the fields to dry. So they didn't want the rain until the 4th of December, or whatever the date was back then. They didn't want the rain until 60 days into the autumn season. What does that have to do with Europe? He says Europe follows the exact same agricultural cycle as Eretz Yisrael. Look at number 26 in the reference sheet. Look at the bold. He says, Be'eretz Ashkenaz, in the German lands, Shezman Hazerhu Michatzi Tishrei Ve'elach. The planting season begins through the second half of Tishrei, which is very similar to Eretz Yisrael. Okay, Shem Lo Yardu Geshamim Miyad, if they don't get the rain halfway through Tishrei, September, October, so he says that the crops are ruined. He says that it attracts birds and mice. So he says we should be doing like Eretz Yisrael. He says, with all due respect to Bavel, but what does Bavel have to do with Europe? Europe should be asking from the 7th of Cheshvan. Okay? So the Rosh tried to change these things. He tried to change it, but he was unsuccessful. So again, another example where even the Rosh was unsuccessful in changing the minhag. He would have liked to see that all of Europe and North America ask from the 7th of Cheshvan, just as they're doing in Eretz Yisrael, because they have nothing to do with Bavel.
I think Rav Moshe brings this also.
Yes, Rav Moshe finds it brings them, we'll mention that. Now, the truth is, the reason why we wait until the 4th of December in the entire diaspora is actually the sheet of Rashi. Number 21 is the Sefer Orah from Rashi. I'm jumping back and forth a little bit. This is a Ktav Yad. This was printed recently in our times. This was a Sefer from Rashi. And Rashi says that they wanted a Zman Katsuv, which means that they didn't want one country in the diaspora doing A, another country in the diaspora doing B. They wanted conformity. They wanted all the countries in Chutz La'aretz to do the same thing. And Bavel was the center of Torah Jewry. So since Bavel was asking on the 4th of December for practical purposes, so they decided that that's going to be the same thing for the entire Gola, for the entire diaspora. Today, Bavel is almost non-existent. Right? There is no Jewish community in Bavel, so the fact that Bavel wants its rain later is now impacting the entire diaspora. It's impacting Lakewood and New York and London and Antwerp and all of these places. It's a little bit ironic that because of this non-existent community in Bavel, right, that only want the rain on the 4th of December, so now the entire Jewry is asking on the 4th of September. The Rosh tried to change that. He was unsuccessful. He writes that Bavel in Iraq. Yeah, the general Iraq period. Right? So obviously you can see, aside from a few army chaplains, Jewish army chaplains there, or maybe some American servicemen, you're not going to find too many Jews over there. Okay? So again, here's something that logic dictates. Logic dictates that the entire world, except for Babel, should be asking as soon as Sukkot is over. Okay, some say Zecher LeMikdash. We don't have a Beit HaMikdash, but had the Beit HaMikdash been around, and had there not been planes, had there not been cars, or back then when they didn't have planes and cars, fine, we're doing something to remember the Aliyah L'Regel, a pilgrimage to the Beit HaMikdash, so we're not doing what logic strictly dictates. Okay, fine. But why wait till the 4th of September? That's not either logical. That's only what Bavel did. But what does Bavel have to do with Europe? What does Bavel have to do with North America? You can change it. That's the way it became. That's the way it became entrenched. Good luck changing it. All right? You're not going to be successful. You will, if you are, you'll surprise me. Okay? So the Rosh says, Yartzeit in Ashkenaz is well known. The Rabbi of the Rosh, the Marami Rudenberg, was kidnapped, thrown into prison, and the Jews were asked to give an astronomical ransom to get him out. The Rosh knew he was next on the hit list, so the Rosh had to flee. Now he fled from Germany. He had to go through Provence, which is in southern France today, which was really an atomic region. It wasn't part of France. It wasn't part of Spain. It was its own school, and he eventually ran to Spain, where he was greeted by the Rajba, who was the leader of rabbinic Jewry. The Rosh, again, he seemed to have been very keen on changing minhagim according to what he believed the truth was, because when he came to Spain, they were not putting on tefillin on Chalamoid, and he was adamant you have to put tefillin on a Chalamoid, so he came and he changed the minhag in Spain. Okay, he didn't seem to believe that you have to adhere to every single minhag. The Rambam didn't think that way, but later on, it became much more accepted that you stick to minhag. Okay, so the Rosh said, I went through Provence. He said he heard that in the city of somebody can help me with that. Some city in Provence. He says that they were beginning to ask for rain on the 7th of Cheshvan. I was very happy. I was very pleased to see that at least in one place in Chutz La'aretz they're doing as in Eretz Yisrael, they were doing the logical thing. Let Europe follow the agricultural cycle of Eretz Yisrael. Let them ask on the 7th of Cheshvan, the same day that Eretz Yisrael is asking for. Okay, by the way, I will note that in Tunisia, they do ask on the 7th of Cheshvan. Tunisia is one of the few communities in Chutz La'aretz today that go according to the wish and the opinion of the Rosh to begin to ask on the 7th of Cheshvan. Okay? Says the Aruch HaShulchan, Rav Epstein, he says the Rosh was already marach. He went at lengths in the tshuva to say that it's logical that we should begin to ask for rain on the 7th of Cheshvan. He was unsuccessful. Look at the last line from the Aruch HaShulchan. It's not logical, but it's like a baskol. It's like a voice came out of heaven that said that we're going to wait until the 4th of September to ask for rain. Okay? It's funny because TORAH b'shamayim, when the baskol came out and tried to be machriya, tried to decide the halach in favor of Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenes, Rabbi Shua said TORAH b'shamayim, but apparently this is a baskol that was here, that was heated. Okay? So that's it. It's not logical, but that is what is done. Okay? Okay, that's a discussion in Tosfos. Okay. Part number 3 of the Shiur. Okay, so let me just give a little bit of an interim summary. There are 3 key dates here. One is the end of Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres / Ishu Chag. The second key date is the 7th of Cheshvan. The third key date is the 4th of September. The 4th of December, thank you. The reason to wait to the 7th of Cheshvan is to let the pilgrimagers get back home. That reason isn't really logically applicable anymore, but that's what's done in Eretz Yisrael. The next day, yeah?
What about the idea of being protected by Hashem? You do a mitzvah. All these people go to Yerushalayim.
Yeah, so I think the idea was,
Anyway,
very good. Right, so your question is basically the pilgrimages will get divine protection when traveling back, so the rain shouldn't be an issue. The answer is we're not necessarily concerned about their safety. We're concerned that if it's so difficult for them to get back, they might be discouraged, disincentivized to come back the next time. You know, yeah. December, 4th of December. Yeah, 4th of December is for Chutz La'aretz.
I know.
Yeah.
Which before you say September.
4th of December. Yeah, just a little slip of the tongue. Okay, so now, so those are the 3 key. If you want to be purely logical and just forget about what our ancestors did, you want to just go purely according to logic, then Eretz Yisrael and Europe and North America, except for the few servicemen in Iraq, let's put them at the side for a moment, everybody should be saying V'sein Talamot as soon as Sukkot is over. Okay, that's the logic. I know one person who doesn't, but...
Is he a farmer? He's probably not even a farmer.
Yep, exactly. So now we get to the next section of the Shiur. What happens if somebody's traveling back and forth? Okay, so let's say today you have a flight to New York. I hope not. Maybe let's pick another city. Let's Florida. Okay, you're flying to Florida. That's better. Okay, you're flying to Florida, Miami Beach. So in Miami Beach, they're going to wait until the 4th of December to say V'sein Umatar. What should you do? Should you do as is customary in the house of your residency, Yerushalayim, or should you do what they're doing in Miami Beach? Okay? So there are basically 3 schools of Rishonim. Let's see. The first opinion. The first opinion is the opinion of the Dvar Shmuel. Now, the Dvar Shmuel was written by Rabbi Shmuel Abuhav. Rabbi Shmuel Abuhav was the Rav of Venice, Venezia, approximately 400 years ago. He was a very interesting character. He was a peer of another rabbi. You may have heard of him, Rav Yehuda Arya Mamudina. Anybody familiar with that fellow? Yehuda Arya Mamudina? Also... Yehuda Arya Mimodina. He was also Rav in Venice at the time. They didn't get along. Yehuda Arya Mimodina was a little bit of a problematic rabbi. He was an addicted gambler. Okay. He was a bit of a controversial fellow. And Rav Shmuel Abuhav was a very respected posek. Rav Shmuel Abuhav often decried, he bemoaned the terrible spiritual state in Venice. It seems like Venice was the Las Vegas of the time. He says all of the promiscuity but he was an important posek. He was sent psakim in Tzfat. That's called Abu. Yes. So the family of the Abuavs were from the Gerusha Sfarad. They were expelled from Spain. There was a famous Mahari Abuav who was quoted extensively by the Beis Yosef. He was the rabbinic leader of the Spanish Jews that were expelled. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Rav Shmuel Abuhav was born in Hamburg and eventually made his way to Venice, where he was an important Rav. So the Shud Dvar Shmuel, here, number 58 in the reference sheet. Okay, look at the Dvar Shmuel. He addresses this question. Somebody leaves Eretz Yisrael and he heads to Chutz La'aretz. So he's intending to head back. Says the Dvar Shmuel, a very straightforward psak, number 58 in the reference sheet. He says you do whatever they're doing in the location that you find yourself. So if you go to Miami, do what they're doing in Miami. If you're in Yerushalayim, do what they're doing in Yerushalayim. Your place of residency is not a factor. You know why? Because you need the rain in the place where you are. Okay? That's...
So if you stay longer in Eretz Yisrael, even though you're American?
Even though you're an American, even though you're a Brit, you're a Belgian, just do, that's the psak of Rav Shmuel Abuhav. He's not the only one that passed in that way. The Bercha Yosef, the famous Chidah, also quotes this psak. He brings 2 Rabbanim, Rav Zachariah Guta. He said, I heard from his grandson that that's what his grandfather's psak was. And he also quotes Rav Yaakov Malcho. They maintain that you do wherever you find yourself. That's the first school of poskim. Okay, so that's a pretty straightforward psak. If we went according to that psak, life would actually be fairly simple. You wouldn't have to break your head and figure out what to do. Just do, when in Rome, do as the Romans, and that would be as simple as that. Okay, basically the need for rain is most relevant. Where do you want the rain the most? Wherever you find yourself. Okay, that's the first school of poskim. The second school of poskim is that of the Radvaz. Okay, let me call your attention to number 69 in the reference sheet. The Radvaz was David ibn Zimra. He was the Rosh of Beis in Alexandria. The Beis Yosef, author of the Shulchan Aruch, sat on his Beis Din. He wasn't exactly a Rishon. He lived approximately 500 years ago. He was an Achron technically, but he was very close to the period of the Rishonim. He was a very great posek. He wrote over 10,000 shuvot. We quote him all the time, because you can imagine that somebody who wrote 10,000 shuvos, it's hard not to quote him on almost every single topic that you come across. It's interesting. I'll get a little bit off on a tangent about the Radvaz. I always love to mention this because I find it fascinating. There was the famous Smicha controversy. There was the Rav of Tzfat also about 500 years ago. That period when they were writing the Shulchan Aruch in the times of the Beis Yosef. He was the Rebbe of the Shulchan Aruch, the Rebbe of Rabbi Yosef Karo. His name was Rabbi Yaakov Beirav, and he was the Rav in Tzfat. And they decided that they had to renew the Smicha. Now, I know a lot of people go to yeshiva and they get smicha. He says, I have smicha from Soloveitchik and YU. I have smicha from Rav Pam and TORAH V'das. Everybody talks about smicha. It's not real smicha. It's a borrowed term. Real smicha means that you're able to be called Rebbe. Some Amoraim in the Gemara are called Rebbe because they have the official smicha. Smicha means that you've been given the authority to paskin on things like knasot, fines. You can sit on the Sanhedrin, etc., and you have a smicha that comes from an unbroken chain that goes all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Mari Beirav says, in order to herald the era of Mashiach, we need to set up the Sanhedrin, because the Rambam in Hilchos Melachim tells us that the Sanhedrin will tell us who Eli Hanavi is, Eli Hanavi will tell us who Mashiach is. Mashiach is going to defeat all the enemies of Klal Yisrael. He's going to build the base of Mikdash, and then you're going to know he's Mashiach. You know, there have been so many false messiahs throughout the history of the Jewish people. This guy pops up and says, I'm the Messiah. This guy, there's no end to them. So guess what? If you want to know who the Messiah is, he's going to have to be confirmed by Eli Hanavi. Eli Hanavi will have to be confirmed by the Sanhedrin. So Rabbi Yaakov Beirav decided that he wants to reinstate the Sanhedrin with his Talmidim, and he was Masmich the Beis Yosef, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, and he was also Masmich of Chaim Vital, and the Maral Bach, who was also from the Grushay Sfard. He was the Rav in Yerushalayim. They sent him a letter, Mazel Tov, we made you a Musmach. So instead of saying Yasher Koyach, thank you very much, he blew his top. He said, who gave you the right to renew the smicha? Right? You have to consult with the basin of Yerushalayim. And it became a very, very big fight. Okay?
But Rabbi Yosef Karo is Achon Smuch.
That's right. He's the end of the Smuchim. Rabbi Yosef Karo. Exactly. So they sent the question to the Radvaz. They wanted the Radvaz's opinion. So the Radvaz sided with Rambach. The Radvaz says, no, you can't renew the smicha. He gave a number of reasons. And one of the reasons that he gave, he says, he doesn't believe that there's a Rav, a posek in his generation that could paskin b'chol Torah kula. In order to get the smicha, you have to be able to paskin in every single area of Torah. He doesn't believe that there's somebody like that in his generation. That's why that's one of the reasons why he's against the smicha. And I find that interesting that the Radvaz himself answered 10,000 shaylas and shuvas on every single topic of halacha, but yet he held there was nobody around that could paskin. Halachas kama v'kama. That's on a tangent. I always love to mention a little story about the Radvaz. So now let's get back to our topic and let's see what the Radvaz paskins. The Radvaz says it depends on where you intend to be until the end of the rainy season. Okay, so for those of you who are flying tomorrow, next week to Miami, when are you planning on coming back? Are you planning on staying in Miami until Pesach, or are you planning on coming back before Pesach? Pesach is the end of the rainy season. So he says, if you're intending to stay in Miami until Pesach, that means you're going to be in Chutz La'aretz for the entire duration of the rainy season. So you switch tracks and you begin to say, or you don't say the same Talamater in accordance with the Bnei Chutz La'aretz. If you're intending to come back before Pesach, so then you do as they are doing in Eretz Yisrael. You continue to act in accordance with your place of residency. Okay? The Maharikash, Mari Castro, he didn't come from Cuba. His name was Mari Castro. He was a student of the Radvaz. He adds another chiddush. He says it also depends on where your wife and kids are. A person identifies where his wife and kids are. So if your wife and kids are still in Yerushalayim, your biggest concern is that there should be rain in Yerushalayim where your wife and kids are, and that's where it's kover. That's the second school. That's the opinion of the Radvaz. And then we have the third school, number 72 in the reference sheet, is the Prichadash, Rabbi Cheskel di Sarlo. He was the Rav of Yerushalayim. They made a cherem against him because he was the first to begin to be chaylik on the psakim of the Shulchan Aruch. He was the Rav of Yerushalayim. He died at the age of 42. He died at the age of 42. He was a very great posek. He said, "Where do you plan on being for the year?"
What was it?
Right? I think his name was Rabbi Cheskel di Sarlo, if I'm not mistaken. He was the Rav of Yerushalayim. He says, where do you intend to be for the year? The Gemara in Bava Basra says that if you intend to settle down in a place for an entire year, you have to start paying the taxes in the city, the Arnona. There are certain city taxes to build the walls, to build the defenses of the city. So if you plan on being there for 12 months, then you're considered a member of the city. That's 1 year. The truth is, I would have thought that if you're really going to go according to that barometer, maybe you should say 30 days, because the Gemara also says that if you live in a place for 30 days, you're not considered a resident of the city, but you're considered someone who resides in the city. Okay, that's a discussion unto itself. Okay, so I'm going to mention Rav Moshe Feinstein. Now, I wrote this chiddush down, and I was very proud. I didn't think that anybody else said it. I found it in Rabbi Vad Yosef Sefer quotes Rav Moshe Feinstein, who says this chiddush. I said it can't be. I went through the Igros Moshe so many times. I went through it, and Rav Moshe does not discuss the shaila. It can't be. Well, Rabbi Vad Yosef was right, because in the first version of the Igros Moshe, somehow the printer by accident omitted 3 tshuvas. One of the 3 tshuvas is this discussion where Moshe discusses what to do when you have travelers between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz, and that tshuva was omitted. Rabbi Vadi Yosef quotes it, and then I discovered that Rav Moshe actually says...
I heard it was my father was a Muslim.
It was a Muslim Rav Moshe. Yeah.
That's how he knows. He goes just like that.
Oh, so very good. So Rav Moshe says like this. Rav Moshe is a beautiful chiddush. Rav Moshe says the Rosh says that you should really, that even in Miami and in New York and in Europe, they should be asking from the 7th of Cheshvan. Why are they not doing that? Tzarech iyun. Logic dictates that Europe and North America should be doing as Eretz Yisrael. They have the same agricultural cycle. Okay, we don't do that. That's the minhag. The minhag is not that way. So what can we do? The minhag is that we wait till the 4th of September. But if you have travelers, 4th of December. But if you're traveling back and forth, and anyways you're subject to Machogas Achanim what to do, so in that case, Dai HaRosh, the Rosh could already tilt the scale. In other words, we don't want to contradict the Rosh because the minhag doesn't conform with the Rosh. But if you're traveling back and forth, there is no minhag. Some places can say this, say do A, some places can say do B. So there's no minhag that forces us to do contrary to the Rosh. So therefore, the Pesach of Rav Moshe was very brilliant. That if you are visiting Eretz Yisrael, you're a Miami guy and you're visiting Eretz Yisrael, do as the Israelis, because there is already, logic says that even in Miami they should be doing like the Israelis. The communities in Miami can't do what is logical because the minhag inhibits us from doing what the Rosh wanted to be done. But if you're traveling, there is no minhag. So then do as the Rosh. Then you say V'sein Talamotar when visiting Eretz Yisrael, and vice versa too. If you are going to Miami this week, continue to say V'sein Talamotar. In other words, both ways we use the Rosh as a way to tilt the scale. An example of that is, for example, we've all had that experience of Rosh Chodesh being on a Sunday. Okay, so what do people do? You finish your Shalosh Shudas early because you get into Machogas. Some poskim say that if you began your meal on Shabbos and your meal and your Shalosh Shudas went into Rosh Chodesh, the Taz and many others say and the Alavi Avai. Many poskim, the Bach and the Ben Ish Chai, say no, say just Ritzei. The beginning of the meal is more important. Many other poskim say, the Maharash and the Magravam say just the Alavi Avai. The end of the meal is more important. Well, comes along the Mishnah Berurah, the Magen Avraham, that says the Rosh holds you should never say Ritzei on Matzah Shabbos. That's the opinion of the Rosh. So in this case, where you don't have a minhag, the Rosh is good enough to tilt the scale and therefore say just the Alavi Avai, because according to the Rosh, you should never be saying Ritzei on Matzah Shabbos. It's an example that sometimes you have to adhere to certain psak, because that's the minhag olam. But when you already have a machlokas poskim, and therefore there is no minhag that binds you, so therefore now you can do as the Rosh instructed you to do.
Shabbat is
Yeah.
on the Rosh Chodesh, Leil Rosh Chodesh.
Yeah.
You cannot say Ritzei v'Chnitzenu and
Yalva because there's a tarti desatri. Yeah. That's some say it is a tarti desatri. Some say it's not a tarti. It's self-contradictory to say Ritzei and Yalavi Avo when Shabbos is for Ritzei and Sunday is for Yalavi Avo. That's the whole discussion. But according to the Shabura, just say Yalavi Avo because that's what the Rosh holds. You should never be saying Ritzei on Matzah Shabbos. Okay. Anyways, I just mentioned another thing, that this is a bit reminiscent of Yom Tov Sheni. Yom Tov Sheni, there's the whole discussion, the Shulchan Aruch, it's really from the Baal Marav, it's Rechaya Alevi, that says that if you go to Chutz La'aretz, Israelis don't keep Yom Tov Sheni, but they can do Malacha because it's neged the minhag hamakom. It's considered provocative. It might lead to a fight. So you shouldn't do malacha, but you're not really observing Yom Tov Sheni. My brother-in-law, Rabbi Myers, pointed out that it says it takes 15 days for them to go back. It doesn't say it takes 16 days. If they couldn't travel on Yom Tov Sheni, then you should say 16 days. They had to wait another day to travel. So there are a lot of poskim, the Chacham Tzvi, that argue that the Shulchan Aruch was only talking about Israelis going to Chutz La'aretz, but Chutz La'aretz going to Eretz Yisrael, even if they have to keep the Chutznik minhag, but the minhag, lechatchila, was never to observe Yom Tov Sheni.
Certainly that's not in fields, no.
Right. So anyways, we'll finish this year with that. I'd like to finish on time. So I hope you enjoyed this year. I hope that the neshama of Rav Yosef Chaim Hillel was here with us, Yosef Hillel, listening to the shir. I know that he loved Torah and he loved interesting topics. And again, I want to use the opportunity again to thank you, Rabbi Sam, and to thank the OU for hosting this event. It really is a true covet for the neshama. It's a true cover for Yosef Hillel. I know he would have appreciated, and I know he would appreciate everything that's being done for the OU, and we hope to continue for many years ahead of time. Shukran.
Right.